Good morning.
Good morning.
We want to start off this TED Talk with a quick survey of the audience.
How many of you have ever watched your parents argue or discuss their finances or paying a bill?
How many of you have ever heard your parents discuss or argue about a political issue?
What about where to eat dinner? Okay, good.
How about driving directions?
What about a religious belief or idea?
Okay, now you don't need to raise your hands for this one, but how many of you have ever heard your parents discuss or argue about their sexual preferences?
Well, if you didn't raise your hand on that last question, you're normal. In fact, the idea of even hearing your parents talk about sex might feel a little like our 12-year-old would say, sus. But what this tells us is that while most of us have some idea about how to navigate taboo or uncomfortable conversations, most of us don't have a model for what it looks like to talk about or navigate sexual challenges or disagreements.
Or you may have grown up like me and you grew up in a family where sex was talked about openly. I remember when I was 8 years old, me and my sister asked my mom about how babies were made. My mom answered honestly, and I remember her explaining intercourse to us. But I also remember my follow-up question, can I keep my shirt on? She replied, you can, but I don't think you'll want to.
Or maybe you're like me. My dad gave me the sex talk while we were fixing our sprinkler system. There was some metaphor about the male sprinkler part going into the female sprinkler part. It seemed to have some impact on my brother, but I had no clue what he was talking about.
Adam and I both grew up in religious homes where we were taught to wait until marriage to develop a sexual relationship. And what this meant for me is the only thing I could do was talk about it. And I did. And when I was 12 years old, I was caught kissing my boyfriend. And that fear of getting caught again caused me to not kiss another man until I was 21 years old.
As I grew up, I loved joking about sex just to get a reaction out of my friends. But when it came to dating, I was paralyzed about the idea of talking about anything sexual with a partner. It seemed like talking about our bodies was too embarrassing or shameful or vulnerable. And I guess I just hoped that it would get easier with time.
So now you're probably wondering how we got selected to give a TED Talk about sex.
I started to get curious about sexual communication a few years later when I learned that two friends who had been married for quite some time and really seemed to have an idyllic relationship had never had sex, and talking about it was off limits. So it was then a little later during my graduate training as a marriage and family therapist that I started to see just how common it was for couples to get paralyzed or stuck as they were navigating conversations about their sex life. So I decided to focus my research on how couples talk about sex and the impact that it has on their relationships.
At the same time, I had a therapy practice where I was seeing couples and families, and I was also thinking about going back to school to get my doctorate. Adam and I ended up at the same doctoral program where we soon discovered that we both had a research interest in sexual communication and a romantic interest in each other.
So we started to talk about sex a lot, and like two nerds in love, we turned those conversations into more research.
The truth is that we learned to discuss sex not from our parents, but from media, peers, and pornography, which I think we can all agree are not always the most accurate or reliable sources of information on sex.
The irony is we're surrounded by sexual imagery, but very seldom do we see any representation of what honest or vulnerable conversations about sex might look like. So what a lot of us do is we close our eyes and we hope that maybe our partner can read our minds.
When we watch a great sex scene, one of the things that we like is that it feels so effortless. They rarely talk, but they seem to be deeply communicating about something. And the lighting, the music, the way they touch each other tells us that something more is happening.
And maybe you've had those moments in a relationship. But in long-term relationships, it requires something a little different to be able to keep the anticipation and connection alive.
In our research, we looked at heterosexual couples and sexual and gender minorities.
And one truth emerged, which is that having a fulfilling sex life requires communication skills that are different from other types of communication and relationships.
So what is the number one sex tip no one is talking about? Talking about sex.
That's right. Sexually satisfied couples don't have some sex move you don't know about, or some technique, or some sex toy. They get curious and they open their mouths. They, to talk.
They don't even have the same level of desire or sexual preferences all the time.
And so that's where they start to explore what works and what doesn't work for the two of them.
Many couples can be happy and effective at general communication, but our research found that they can still struggle to communicate about sex.
So maybe if you have a strong general communication skills, some couples may be able to figure out whether the toilet paper roll should go over or under, which, as we both know, the correct way is
under.
Over.
The thing is that talking about sex is different from talking about toilet paper, because it's not just an exchange of ideas. When we're talking about sex, we're talking about the sharing of our whole selves with someone who sees all of us.
Yeah, sex is different than talking about finances or politics or religion, because our bodies do a good deal of the conversation. And those things, they can sweat and flap and clap and even fart.
This is true.
So what our research found is that when it comes to sex, how we talk about it and what we talk about can contribute to more sex and better sex.
Our research found that couples who talk more about sex have sex more frequently.
Yeah, they prioritize their partner's pleasure and orgasm more than other couples. And so sex became less about a destination and more about being able to understand each other.
We also found that these couples reported that sex improves over time with more communication. And they also talked about that discussing sex led to greater emotional intimacy.
And most importantly, talking about sex led to greater sexual satisfaction overall.
Imagine sex as a dance. You may come with strong ideas of what the perfect dance looks like. Maybe it's playful, maybe it's intense, or maybe it's tender and vulnerable. But when we're doing partner dance, the idea is not that we express our own ideal choreography. It's about co-creating a dance with our partner that reflects the both of us.
Sexual communication is the dance floor that we build with our partner. It's how we create a space where our connection is shared with each other. And so what makes the dance happen isn't perfect agreement, but it's knowing where the edge is and having a partner that helps you feel safe near the edge so that you can express yourself and explore yourself.
As we begin to feel safe with our partner, we know that we can trust our partner to make some changes to the dance, and we may even want to make changes to the dance floor, whether that's to expand it, shift it, or remove parts that no longer work for us.
So you might ask, how do my partner and I start to be able to build this dance floor? Well, the good news is our research helped identify 3 distinct practices that sexually satisfied couples use when they communicate about sex.
The first is what we like to call mutual enhancement. Couples talked about approaching their sexual relationship with the intent to grow the relationship and ensure that both of them were mutually satisfied and had mutual pleasure.
Yeah, they talked about sharing their ideas openly with their partners and being open to integrate ideas from their partners.
They talked about being able to trust their partner to stop anything that wasn't working for them and that they would find something that worked for the both of them.
Second, sexually satisfied couples understood the importance of fantasy. They reported sharing their fantasies with their partners and then integrating them into their sex life.
A lot of times we think of fantasy as something that's internal or individual, but these satisfied couples told us that when they talked about their fantasies with one another, it created greater emotional intimacy.
Third, sexually satisfied couples discussed having time to create regular check-ins. So they prioritized their sex life to be able to show each other that they wanted to be able to understand what was working and wasn't working. So they set aside time for that.
They don't assume that good sex just happens on its own. They seem to understand that they would experience changes over the course of their sexual relationship and that they needed a way to give and receive feedback in order to be able to adjust to those changes.
So if you don't know where to start with some of these suggestions, it may be helpful to start by approaching your partner and just saying something like, I'd like to start a dialogue about our sex life, even if it's awkward.
You're not bad at sex because you need to talk about it. Long-term relationships will all experience sexual changes.
Learning how to talk about sex is not just about being able to navigate challenges, but about being able to stay close and to feel known.
One of the greatest gifts we can give a partner is our commitment to stay curious about the most intimate parts of them. Sex is one of the most human things that we do. It's messy, it's weird, it's vulnerable, and that's why it's beautiful.
And it's not because we're perfect at it, but because we show up again and again with curiosity, with courage, and with consent. And that's not just great sex, that's love in the making.
We have started the conversation. We ask you to keep it going. Thank you.
Thank you.